So we have a saying in this house, all my bad ideas have wheels. Let me introduce you to my latest bout of bad judgment, this thing. Now this brilliant idea came about because of this video. I decided that we needed to start a dad scooter gang in the neighborhood, and I started hunting for scooters because I can't start a scooter gang without a scooter. Now what I was looking for was a dilapidated old scooter that I could get running, and this is what I wound up with, which was not exactly what I was looking for. Let me tell you about it. So what this is, I picked it up on Facebook Marketplace. It is a 2008 Baron scooter. Baron's the brand. I had never heard of it either. It's essentially a Chinese copy. It's a GY6 motor, so it's a common motor. It has 5 miles on it. 5 miles. It's a 2008. It's 2024 right now. The story goes that I got this thing from a guy who bought it to commute to and from college. Then he never did. It sat in the garage, and his wife told him he had to get the thing the heck out of the garage. So I picked this thing up for 200 bucks. It looks good, but it had its issues. So we're gonna show you how we went through this scooter and got the thing running as cheaply as possible. We'll show you how much we paid for everything. Maybe you pick up a thing or two. Now, when I showed up at the seller's house to inspect it, the only thing I could really check on site was if it had compression. The battery was stone dead. I forgot to bring anything to check it. So when I got it home, I hooked it up and keyed it on. And all the electricals came on, the starter motor keyed over, and even all the lights came on. And that's where it went downhill. Then I checked inside the fuel tank. That is not a good sign. So right off the bat, at a minimum, I know I need to completely treat the gas tank and get all of the rust out of it, because we know it is completely full of rust. This is what remained of the fuel level sending unit. There's a big part missing, and I'm wondering where that went. And after getting the rest of the tank off, I found the other half. It was inside the tank. You can see all the corrosion there, and I tried to pry the float out, and it just ripped apart. I did eventually get the float out, and then I stuck a bore camera into the tank to see what exactly I was dealing with, and I was disappointed, but not surprised. This is what the entire inside of the tank looks like. It is completely covered in rust, and not just surface rust, but chunks of rust. Now this little bore camera is one of my favorite tools, and it was actually really expensive. It just hooks to your phone. If you're interested in this thing, I will have a link for it down below if you want to check it out for yourself. So I'm going to show you the easiest way that I have found to treat a rusty gas tank. Now you see the little red guy on there. I capped all of the ports, and I actually put the broken sender unit back in so it was sealed, and then I filled the entire thing with vinegar. Vinegar is a light acid, and it will start etching away all of the rust and corrosion inside the tank. And I left the tank out in the sun because warming it up does help a lot. And I actually left this thing because it was so badly corroded outside in the sun for a complete week full of vinegar. And after the week, I flushed the tank out, and you can see here the brown in the water and the chunks of stuff coming out of the tank. A lot of stuff came out of this tank. Now, it's always a good idea to look and make sure you actually got the tank clean. So I stuck the bore scope back in there, and it is clean as a whistle through the entire tank. I didn't really find any rust in any places, so we're going to move on to the next step. And you want to make sure before you do this step that you neutralize any of the vinegar in the tank, which means putting some baking soda in there and flushing the tank out completely, and then letting the tank dry. Then I recapped all the holes, and I used a new fuel sending unit to recap the fuel sending unit hole, and then I poured 2-stroke and oil into the tank and swish it all over the place to prevent the tank from flash rusting while I work on the rest of the bike. Next up was getting into the carburetor, because I can only assume if this thing was sitting for as long as it has been, the carburetor is pretty well gummed up. And to absolutely no surprise, this is what I found. The entire carburetor got a solid spray down with carburetor cleaner to wash all of the gunk and corrosion out of the carburetor, and then off camera it went for a ride in the ultrasonic parts cleaner to get all of the orifices and passageways completely clean. While the carburetor was going for a ride in the parts cleaner, we reinstalled the tank. And when we reinstalled the tank, we reinstalled it with the new fuel sending unit, and that fuel sending unit also came with a new gas cap, so we're also going to be installing a new gas cap. No sense in reusing the old one. At this point, I'm operating under the assumption that every single thing in the fuel system is completely shot. So while I was over at the parts store, I picked up a fuel pump as well. Now this is a fuel pump I've actually never really worked with before. This is a vacuum actuated fuel pump. So it pulls vacuum off of the intake manifold, and that's what makes a little diaphragm inside pulse. So I was pretty confident that the old one was shot, so I replaced it with a new one. These are actually really cheap parts. And with that, it was time to retrieve the carburetor out of the ultrasonic parts cleaner. Now, it didn't go for one ride, it went for 4 rides in the parts cleaner because so much crud kept coming out. But after getting the thing reinstalled, I then replaced all of the fuel lines as well, and the very last step in the fuel line process was installing a brand new fuel filter just in case there's some residual crud left in the tank. The battery was about as dead as a battery could be, so we replaced the battery with a fresh new one, and then it was time to give the sucker a crank to see if it started. But not so fast, I can't ride it yet, because both tires won't hold air. The valve stems are completely shot, although the tires look good. So now I'm going to try a little trick that I saw online and see if this works. I want to see if I can replace the valve stems without removing the wheels or the tires from the bike. And that starts by taking a C-clamp and cranking it around right where the valve is and breaking the bead. Now, it took me more than what I had seen online. I had to use a couple clamps around it to get the tire to really compress in, but I did finally manage to get to break the bead and get to the backside of the valve stem. Then, using a razor, I could just cut the thing free and pull it free of the rim. Now, you just have to get a new stem. There are different sizes, so you do want to make sure you get the right size, but you can pick these other things up online or your local parts store for just a few cents. I lubed it up with a little bit of silicone oil. You want to make sure you use silicone oil and not regular oil, because it will break down the rubber. And then it was as simple as just pulling the valve through the rim. Now, I did remove the valve core before I did all this to make reinstalling the wheel and getting it to pop the bead back on a little bit easier. With everything in place and pop back in place, you now remove the clamps and get your air compressor. And you do need an air compressor to get enough air in there to reseat the tire onto the rim. You're going to feel that satisfying pop, and then it's reseated. Then you just remove it, let some of the air out, reinstall the valve core, and you're good to go. I was actually really impressed that this hack worked. I had to do it on the front tire and the back tire, but it saved me from having to take the wheels off the thing, take it into a tire shop, or pull the whole thing apart. Saved me a bunch of time and money. Now, something with these Chinese scooters is all the bodywork is made out of plastic, so I did have to be pretty careful putting it back on to be careful not to break anything. Now, I was fortunate this thing was stored in a garage, so nothing was brittle. It's just all plastic and pretty cheaply made, and I don't want to break anything. Now, I did debadge the thing. I wasn't a big fan of Baron written down the side of it. I'm not exactly royalty. I think it looks a lot better plain without all the labels. And speaking of cheap plastic, these mirrors are cheap plastic. They might be chrome, but they are chromed plastic, and they were done. So I yanked these things off and I put them where they belong. Now, my primary motorcycle is a dual sport, and I have some extra dual sport mirrors laying around, so I grabbed a set of these. They mount on a ram mount ball, and I stuck them on the scooter. This will be good enough for now. And in case you're wondering, yes, that is a Mark II Supra sitting there in the background. And I was just about to take it up for a spin when I remembered I had this thing sitting on my workbench. It's been on here forever. I don't even remember why I bought it, but this is a very basic alarm. You don't need to hook it into anything. It just takes a battery. So I decided, since scooters are easy to steal, I'm going to stick it inside my little luggage compartment, and I'll have kind of an alarm. Now, I was very fortunate there wasn't more wrong with this bike. It pretty much just got up and went, so I took it out for a test ride. I took it close to home just in case I had to call my wife for a rescue in the pickup truck. Fortunately, that was not necessary. But now let's go over what everything cost to get this thing up and running. Now, first and foremost was the purchase price of the bike. I bought the bike for $200, and fortunately, the person who I bought it off of was smart enough to register this thing as non-operational, which means it had no back fees. So all I had to pay was for the transfer, so $200 plus a transfer fee. And then let's go in order of materials used. The first thing that I used in this thing was 2 gallons of white vinegar. That was about $8. Then there was $2 for the 2-stroke oil, $12 for a new fuel sender and fuel cap. And before we move on, my apologies for my hairy knees sticking out in this video. I should have worn pants. It was really hot that day, not making excuses, but I'm making excuses. Now, I've always got carb cleaner on hand in the garage, so I'm going to say $2 because I used a little bit of the can that I already had in there. Getting the rest of the fuel system in line cost me $8 for fuel lines, clamps, and filters, and another $16 for that fuel pump. I actually got it locally, and I think it was a little bit cheaper than that. The tire valves I also got at my local motorsports shop. They were $1 a piece, so $2. Shout out to Chronic Racing in Simi Valley. Those guys are awesome. A basic battery was $30, and I thought about doing the lithium thing I did on my motorcycle, but I decided just to go cheap on this one. $30 lead battery is fine. Now, the alarm was obviously not needed, but I stuck it on there. I'm not going to include it in my total price, but if you wanted to put one of these on there, it's $17. If you're going to put an alarm on there, honestly, get a better one than this one, though. And but last but not least is the rear view mirrors. Now, I only use one of these, the other one's on my dual sport, so I'm going to say $30 instead of $60. You can get much cheaper mirrors than this, but this is what I had, so I'm going to include that in the price. So what did the grand total for this little scoot come to? So with the scooter purchase price and the transfer fee and all that stuff, it came to a total of $295. I did it for under 300 bucks, and this thing looks like it rolled off the showroom floor yesterday, and it had 4 miles on it, which means I'm still in the break-in period, even though it's over a decade old. And when I got done with that test ride, I walked into the house and I told my wife, I'm upset. And she said, why? And I said, nobody told me these things were so much fun. I've got dirt bikes, I've ridden street bikes, I've ridden all that stuff. I've never ridden anything this small, and this thing was a hoot to tear around the neighborhood on. So I hope I can convince some of my dad friends to buy these things so we can start our little dad scooter gang. But if you found this video entertaining, please give it a great big thumbs up. If you want to see more stuff like this, hit that subscribe button. Good luck on your search if you're looking for something like this. I hope you find something fun. And of course, thanks for watching.